Hello and welcome to another selection of the hottest Q&As Reddit has to offer. What is the most severe case of someone being completely out of touch with reality you've ever seen? The pastor of a small town church insisted that members set up the parish hall and provide food and beverages for 125 people after every Sunday service, even though the average attendance was only around 20 people. Week after week, month after month, much food would be disposed of and large urns of coffee dumped down the sink, and all because the pastor was in denial about the reality of weekly attendance. They didn't even donate it to people who need it? Now I don't know much about this Jesus fellow, but I feel like he might have something to say about that choice. I will never forget the man who angrily told me, a wheelchair user with no feet and no prosthetics, to go down the stairs if I didn't want to wait for the elevator. I had been talking to my friend, and mentioned we were going to be a little late because of the huge line. Many comments, so I'll answer a few of the reoccurring ones here if that's okay. As far as I could tell, the guy wasn't blind. I know most of these comments were a joke, but there were a few that were asking genuinely. It's not impossible, you can't always tell, but he turned around and made direct eye contact with me, which indicated he at least realized I was 3 feet tall at the most, so I was either a little person or in a wheelchair, both of which probably shouldn't be using the stairs at that time. The stairs were like a stampede of people. It was the central city station in my city at peak hour, and it was busier than usual because of less trains at the time. Even if I had my prosthetics, I would not have been able to safely get down without being pushed over. As for what the guy was thinking? No clue. There's a huge wheelchair sports program in that area, so people in wheelchairs are very common, and many are ambulatory wheelchair users, meaning they can walk for a little while, but not very well /safely/ for very long. It's very common for those people, and myself if I'm wearing my prosthetics and using my chair, to get hassled for faking it, so maybe that's what he was thinking? That I was somehow faking? Honestly, I have no idea. As I said before, he was looking right at me when he said it. What happened after was he glared at me for a few seconds. I was too surprised to say anything in return. He seemed to have a moment of realization and awkwardly turned back around to face the door. My friend and I had a good chuckle over it after he was out of earshot. Parents of a 35-year-old woman, who was hospitalized after suffering severe anoxic brain damage 20 years ago. She had been in the same ward since, barely conscious. They refused to get her transferred to a more suitable facility for 20 years, saying that there's no reason to do so, those facilities are for lost causes, and their daughter is going to make a full recovery, finish school, get married and be totally fine. Working in hospitals got me quite a collection of these stories, but this one I thought was one of the saddest ones. In college I had a roommate from the most sheltered part of Long Island. We met an exchange student from Switzerland, and I swear to God she said this in complete seriousness, "Oh wow, I didn't know people actually lived in Switzerland. I thought there were just banks there." Most sheltered part of Long Island, I'm guessing the Hamptons? Ding ding ding. There is a girl at my work that always bitches about not making enough BC. She makes $200 to $300 a paycheck. Then is always the first to leave early and always shows up late and has other PPL take her shifts. She asked me how I make $600 to $800 a paycheck. I said, BC, I work more. I'm currently at work taking over her shift. She doesn't realize if you don't work more you'll be paid less. I've worked with a few people like that. Some who've gotten angry with me making more due to being there 3x as long and working twice the hours. This was from a regional manager of Starbucks, after they removed merit-based raises that could go up to a 5% increase, changed to a flat 2% increase. When she asked if people like the new raise plan, I said actually no, they feel unmotivated with no reason to perform any better than just normal. Regional manager, your staff need to realize working isn't about money. If working isn't about money, why would the company decrease raises from 5% to 2%? To make more money, that's right. More for me, but not for thee. My parents paid for half the down payment on my house. Pay for our landscaper, house cleaner, child daycare, car insurance, and give my wife and I a monthly allowance. We're completely self-sufficient human beings who even try and give other friends financial advice. Obviously written in the voice of someone I know. Sounds like the kind of person who when asked for financial advice would reply with, just get more money, because for them, it really is that simple. Poor? Be rich. Work with a girl who is a flat earther and on top of that denied the existence of space. When the topic came up and I disagreed, she asked if I had ever been there. Obviously I haven't. I told her I have also never been to Japan, and that does not mean it doesn't exist. She complained to management about my intolerance of her beliefs. Worked with a guy like this. Basically gravity doesn't exist and the moon is a hologram and we live in some sort of Truman Show dome because that makes much more sense. My cousin was spoiled and sheltered her entire childhood through college. Then her parents stupidly cut the leash without any preparation and released her into society. She quickly got in trouble for bouncing checks all over town. My mom picked her up and asked why the hell she was writing bad checks everywhere. Turns out my cousin was under the impression that as long as you had checks in your checkbook, you had money in your account. She didn't understand that you deposit in a number and then can spend or withdraw up to that amount. Please teach your kids basic finance. Note, this was like 1996 before it turns into a who writes a check anymore discussion. You can basically replace check with credit card and it's updated for present times. Apparently there are people who think that they're just free money. Credit card at the limit? Time to open up another one. My sister grew up with everything handed to her, and literally cried when her first car wasn't the color she wanted. Married rich. Can't fathom why I can't take off work whenever it suits me, and says stuff like I wouldn't ask my boss for a week off, I would tell him I am taking the week off. IT wouldn't ask my boss for a week off, I would tell him I am taking the week off. You'd be surprised how many people don't understand how PTO accrual works for salaried employees. You get 15 days off a year, just take them all right now. Had a friend who insisted she was in a relationship with a C-list celebrity whom she met once during a comic convention. All the celebrity's Instagram and Twitter posts were for her and everything had a meaning behind it. When the celebrity got married, she said that it was just for the media so she and celebrity could live a quiet life. When he didn't do anything for her birthday, she had a breakdown. She went to therapy not long after. These symptoms are called delusions of reference and they're very common. My step-grandma who called me a lazy useless loser because I was struggling to find a job after college back in 2009 when the economy was in the gutter. She called me every name you can possibly think of, but the most common phrase was dependent loser since I had to move back in with my parents. This is the same woman who never had a job in her life and was supported 100% by my grandpa, and is now currently living off of his social security and pension. What a way to call the kettle black. This is my sperm donor, called me a lay retard who never got off the computer when I tried to teach myself how to code. He's only worked one dead-end job in his life where he just has to show up, while I had 2 jobs at the time that were physically demanding while my mom took all the money from my paychecks and said I could get it back as an allowance that I never saw. My sister-in-law, kicked out by her boyfriend, comes to stay with us for a few days. We suggest looking for a flat/cheap house to rent near us. She won't live in the scummy part of town near us, she'd like a 3-bed house with garden in the best part of town. She has no savings and isn't sure if she has a job, was a part-time cashier in a supermarket, stopped going to work when COVID came, note, not furloughed, supermarket still open, she's just not going in. When I suggested maybe she couldn't afford £500,000 on a family home on her salary, she suggested she'd just get a council house. Disregarding the huge waiting list and the fact that most council properties are the ghetto parts of town. This is just the crust of a deep layer of unhinged fantasy world that she lives in. My sister is like this. She thinks she is a millionaire who is just down on her luck temporarily, despite the fact that she can't hold down a job, take care of her pets, or pay her bills. It's incredibly difficult to watch. My parents' neighbor thought that her garden was too small for her sons to play in. So when she met my parents for the first time, the first thing she actually said was, "Can you give me some of your garden so my sons have more space to play in?" Thankfully my parents just said no. For context, they live in a very expensive neighborhood where houses cost on average from £750,000 to £1 million. The gardens in that neighborhood are a lot bigger on average than the majority of gardens in the UK. I've never heard a story of somebody being as painfully out of touch as that woman. British garden is what you guys call a backyard. Gotta be careful with people like that, they'll just keep asking for more and more. Like they say, give someone an inch and they'll take a yard. I used to work at a software company in downtown Boston. One of the best perks of the job at the time was the flexibility in hours. Many folks had regular WFH days. Myself, I knew I could drop my kids off at school, get into the office by 9:30 and my boss had no issue with it whatsoever. Others with kids had similar arrive late or leave early schedules depending on their childcare. After a few years a new CEO comes in, Spends a month observing how the office works, then calls for a company-wide meeting. During the meeting she tells everyone she believes having a full office 8 to 5 is the most productive environment, and at the start of the next month, all WFH was cancelled, and she wanted everyone in the office during those set hours. No showing up late or leaving early. A lively debate ensued, with discussions of there being very little warning, to pleas of flexibility, to concerns of making necessary childcare arrangements, especially given that in many cases, i.e. schools, we couldn't adjust those times. Plus, commuting into Boston sucks. After listening to all of these arguments, she finally responds with a long speech of appreciating the sacrifices everyone has to make to better the company, everyone doing their part, blah blah blah. She ends it by saying, "I understand where you're all coming from. Years ago when my kids were little, my husband and I had to hire 3 nannies to cover all of the times we had to work. I remember we all looked around at each other, speechless. It was also the moment I realized I would have to start looking for another job." When the millionaire CEO thinks hiring 3 nannies is a relatable example to her middle-class employees, it's pretty clear she's not going to change her mind. I worked on shifts with a guy for years who thought every single person was out to get him. I've never met anyone who had such a warped sense of reality. He would joke on with someone, then go away for the weekend and stew on one particular thing, then come in on Monday absolutely raging over taking something the complete wrong way. I've seen him attack 2 people and heard about a third. Thing is, he's so dopey, everyone thinks he's harmless, and that's just the way he is. A guy I trained as an apprentice has just started on shifts with him, doesn't take anyone being a dick well at all. I think they'll do well together, haha. That sounds concerning. Is he in an okay mental space? I went to a private international school in London as a teenager. Most kids there had parents working good jobs, but in between them were some filthy rich kids with parents in the oil industry or something similar. In 8th grade we were talking about our Easter break, and my friend from Belgium was talking about how his family had decided last minute to go there over the break, but had decided to drive there because there were no flights available. Then this Russian billionaire classmate of mine asked him, "Why don't you take a private jet?" She was so clueless when we started laughing. What would have been your answer or question? Leave it in the comments below. Slap that like and subscribe button for more, and check out the link in the video description for even more answers. Peace out, and catch you in the next video.